Hello, this is Vox Evening News brought to you from London. I'm Kesha Gatari. Tonight's headlines. The International Criminal Court rules South Africa violated its obligations to the court by failing to arrest Sudan's president in 2015. Zambia's president declares a state of emergency. Foreign ministers from Africa and Europe meet in Rome to discuss the migrant crisis. The International Criminal Court has ruled that South Africa was wrong to not arrest Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir when he visited the country in 2015. It said that Mr. Bashir did not enjoy diplomatic immunity and therefore should have been arrested and handed over to the court's prosecutor for his alleged role in the conflict in Darfur. President Jacob Zuma's government has been arguing that the ICC demands were incompatible with South African law, which accords diplomatic immunity to heads of states. The ruling African National Congress is currently pushing for the withdrawal of South Africa from the ICC, a move that has been criticized by rights groups. Staying in South Africa, President Jacob Zuma on Wednesday sought to calm an increasingly factitious battle to succeed him that is threatening to split the ruling ANC party apart. Mr. Zuma is to step down as the party head in December and as national president ahead of the 2019 election. The next ANC chief should be on track to win the grand election and become South Africa's next president. But the party has recently suffered a sharp decline in popularity. The two leading runners are former African Union chief Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the president's ex-wife, and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, a former wealthy businessman.
Actually, because just to talk a bit about factions, they've become so deep. You don't say because we have won to a candidate that we're supporting, then the rest are declared an enemy. Winner takes all. That's not good for the organization.
We're looking forward to the elective conference and we're hoping for a good outcome that will actually manage to give us suitable leadership that will help to drive the processes of the ANC and the country forward.
Most definitely. The people love the ANC. They have some views and differences with some of the leaders, but when it comes to elections, people will still vote for the ANC or for Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela. They love the ANC.
Zambian President Edgar Lungu has declared a state of emergency on Thursday after a series of alleged arson attacks. On Wednesday, the president announced that he would seek Parliament's approval to impose a state of emergency after a fire gutted the country's biggest market in what he said was politically motivated arson. Political tension in Zambia have been rising since the arrest of the main opposition leader, Hakainde Hichilema, on treason charges. Under Zambian state of emergency law, police can prohibit public meetings, close roads, impose curfews, and restrict movements. The country's last state of emergency was declared in 1997 by the then President Frederick Chiluba after a coup attempt. It was lifted the following year.
We are coming from a situation where people are saying, if this election is not won by me, there will be mayhem, there will be Armageddon. We saw what happened after elections, and it has continued progressively. Armageddon is coming, and maybe I should sit here smiling and saying, no, it's okay. They will say I'm a dictator. I'm not that dumb. I've got a job to do. So if those people think, I'm being excessive, yes, allow me for once to be excessive in the interest of the Zambian people. But that excess is within the law. This is what people need to understand. There is no excess here. Everything is within the law in white and black.
When there is a state of emergency, that all the rights are taken away from us. So now, if my rights are taken away from me, for instance, how am I going to live? How can I live as a human being? No freedom of movement, no freedom of speech, no freedom of expression. You understand?
For me as a student, I think it's going to be inconveniencing if I'm going to have time limits as to when I'm supposed to go to school. I think it's going to be inconveniencing because I would have some time that I've set for myself maybe to study. So if I'm having those limits, it's going to inconvenience my work at school.
The state of emergency is to control the crime which is happening by the day of the time. Because as you can see, people are taking advantage of movement of people.
7 children and an adult have been killed and 40 others injured following a stampede at a football stadium in Malawi's Bingu National Stadium in the capital Lilongwe. Thousands of people had gathered at the 40,000 capacity stadium ahead of a match between the country's top sides, Nyasa Big Bullets and Silver Strikers, as part of Independence Day celebrations. Stadium gates were supposed to be opened at 6:30 in the morning local time to let fans in for the free match, but they were opened 3 hours later. Fans then tried to force their way in, leading to the stampede. In a statement, President Peter Mutharika offered his condolences to those affected by the tragedy, promising that the government will be on hand to assist the bereaved families. Authorities have launched an investigation. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and his main rival Raila Odinga have pulled out of 2 televised presidential debates ahead of the August 8th elections. Initially, the 2 frontrunners were to go head-to-head, while the 6 other candidates would hold a separate debate match on Monday, with the second debate on July 24th. However, officials in both parties said that the president and the former prime minister decided to pull out after the plans changed to a format that would pit all 8 candidates against each other. Next month, Kenyans go to the polls in national elections, choosing from 14,500 candidates contesting in a series of races for president, governor, parliament and county assembly seats. Foreign ministers from African and European countries affected by the migrant crisis have met in Rome on Thursday to discuss plans to ease pressure on Italy. The ministers from across the bloc gathered in the Estonian capital of Tallinn after Italy appealed desperately for help. The country has already taken in nearly 85,000 of the 100,000 people who have arrived on its shores this year. Discussions are centred around the European Commission plan, which earmarks 35 million euros in aid for Rome, as well as proposals for working with Libya and other countries to stem the flow of migrants at the source. Most of those landing in Italy are sub-Saharan Africans who have crossed by sea from Libya.
Dato risposte immediate, ha ottenuto.
The meeting has already produced concrete results. Everyone agreed on support for local communities and for the authorities in transit countries. A great commitment to tackling people smugglers, European police commissions, more resources for the IOM and the UNHCR for migrant assistance in transit countries to help voluntary returns, and support for an information campaign on the risks of illegal migration.
La crisi dei migranti e dei rifugiati non può essere.
The migrant and refugee crisis cannot be stopped in the Mediterranean alone. That is why we have strengthened the direct relationship with Niger, Ethiopia, Sudan and Chad. Also, getting other countries from the region involved, as well as the European countries involved here and international organizations.
18 milioni per la organizzazione.
Italy has pledged 80 million euros for the IOM for assisted voluntary returns from Libya to the migrants' countries of origin, obviously with dignity and full respect for their rights. In short, if the assisted voluntary returns from Libya to the countries of origin are successful, those migrants who return to their countries of origin obviously won't set off for Europe.
Noi crediamo che se sarà
We believe that if the border controls in transit countries work, the sales of tickets for Europe will start to drop off. The ticket sales are sold by the largest criminal travel agency in history, the one run by traffickers. They sell tickets to Europe, but if they are no longer able to guarantee an arrival in Europe, the agency will fail.
Amnesty International has blamed failing EU policy for the soaring death toll among refugees and migrants in the central Mediterranean. In a report, it also accused the EU of turning a blind eye to abuses in Libyan detention centres and mostly leaving it up to sea rescue charities to save migrants. The Union has so far made no public comments about Amnesty's latest report.
European leaders need to increase massively safe and legal routes for refugees and migrants to access European territory in a safe manner. 2016 was the deadliest year on record on the Central Mediterranean route. 2017 has already seen a loss of life of over 2,000, and the death rate at the moment is even higher than the one we saw in 2016. We are at almost 3 people every 100 losing their life in the Mediterranean, trying to reach safety or a better life in Europe. NGOs have rescued about 28% of people on the route last year and over 30% roughly this year. What European states should be doing is exactly what NGOs are doing, and instead they are agreeing today on rules that will put a lot of obstacles on the activities of these organizations without substituting their role as rescuers with state vessels. And we think that this is really a perfect storm. This is a recipe for massive death toll at sea in future weeks and months.
Libya's Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar on Wednesday reported his forces had taken full control of Libya's second city, Benghazi, from rival armed groups after a 3-year campaign. The battle for Benghazi between the Libyan National Army and an array of Islamist militants and other fighters has been part of a border conflict since Libya slipped into turmoil following the 2011 fall of then-leader Muammar Gaddafi. Victory would likely mark a major advance for the one-time commander in Gaddafi's army, who has slowly gained ground in the eastern and southern Libyan regions in defiance of a UN-backed government that is struggling to extend its influence from the capital, Tripoli.
وبعد أن قدمنا قوافل من الشهداء الأبرار.
After having sacrificed columns of the virtuous martyrs we said farewell to, who died on the battlefield, the military forces announced to you the news of the liberation of the town of Benghazi from terrorism, a total liberation. The National Army announces its victory on the field of honor against terrorism, a divine victory, so that from today Benghazi might return to a new era of peace and security.
Hundreds of policemen gathered on Thursday in front of the Tunisian parliament near Tunis to demand the adoption of a law protecting them in their work. Demonstrators who gathered answered a call by the National Union of Internal Security Forces, and they've condemned attacks on security agents in recent weeks. On June 24th, a police officer died after being severely burned by a Molotov cocktail during violence in the Sidi Bouzid region. 2 other officers were injured in clashes where stones and other debris were thrown at officers. In 2015, the union demanded a salary increase for law enforcement officials, noting in particular the increasing difficulty of their task in the country that had been affected by a revolution in 2011 and an increase in jihadist attacks.
Today, the state is dropping agents who apply the law, and this is the reason that people are talking today about the weakness of the state, because members of the security forces are not protected. We protect people, we assure Tunisia's security and of people, but we are not protected, neither us nor our families.
Following a meeting in Cairo on Wednesday, foreign ministers of the Saudi-led bloc that imposed an embargo on Qatar say they regret the Emirates' negative response to a list of demands to end a diplomatic crisis. The ministers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates said Qatar's response to their conditions had no substance.
لم نجد إلى اليوم أي بوادر حقيقية حتى بعد الرد.
We haven't seen any real sign after yesterday's answer from Qatar that it's interested in its brothers and neighbours as much as it's interested in extremism, incitement, destruction and terrorism.
فيما يتعلق
There is a political and economic boycott. They will continue until Qatar changes its policy for the better. We all hope for that.
In the Central African Republic, some 78 people have been killed following a truck accident. The truck was carrying goods and passengers when it crashed. The accident occurred on Tuesday outside the town of Bambari, and it was travelling to a weekly market day in the village of Malaum. In a statement, the head doctor at the University Hospital of Bambari said 72 people were also injured. Bambari MP Amaseka Topi said the truck was overloaded and travelling faster than normal. Well, we're heading into a short commercial break, but still to come on this evening's programme. 5 soldiers have been killed in an attack in Niger. Public workers in Uganda face new strict dress codes. And tourism on the continent is on the rise.